Yo, what's up guys? It's Noah here, and in today's video, we're going to be breaking down the NBA slate on Draftkings and Yahoo for Tuesday, January the 19th. Now, pretty weird day today. We have just a 2-game slate, and both games start at 9 o'clock Eastern time, so a little bit of a late night Tuesday night if you are making lineups for this 2-game slate. Both games start at 9 o'clock Eastern time, but even though it's a 2-gamer, we still have some big prize pools. Draftkings running out a $1 million contest with $200K to first. Honestly, I think this is the biggest prize pools they've run since like opening night. I don't think I've seen like a $1 million total prize pool contest since like opening night. So it's kind of crazy on a 2-game slate. That's when they decide to throw out the big tournaments. But maybe they have something in their system that tells them that 2-game slates are really popular. I still plan on playing this slate, even though it is just 2 games. I'll still, I probably won't be playing my normal volume, but I'll still have some action in. So we'll break it down team by team. We'll start off with the OKC Denver game, and then we'll move over to the New Orleans Utah game. Since it's only 2 games, should be a relatively quick video. But before we do get started, guys, as always, I would appreciate it if you would hit that like button down below. Hit that subscribe button as well if you are new to the channel. I have a ton of NBA content going up on this channel. I upload videos basically every single day. I'm trying to live stream as much as I can as well. I've been live streaming recently, so ton of NBA content coming out. I'll still be making NFL videos as well. I'll have NFL videos going up basically until the Super Bowl, until the season ends. So ton of content coming out on the channel. Would appreciate it if you would subscribe and click that notification bell so that way you do get notified every time I upload. You will get notified every time I do go live. And even though it's just a 2-gamer tonight, I do plan on going live. Probably not at 3:30. Normally I go live in the afternoon around 3:30 Eastern time, but I think I'm going to wait a little bit since we have such a late lock. I'll probably go live around maybe 5 o'clock Eastern time. So if you're home then, if you're at your computer and you can tune into the stream, highly would suggest you do so. If you have any questions about tonight's slate, I will be able to answer all your questions in the live stream. So be sure to tune in this afternoon, probably around 4:30, 5 o'clock Eastern time. I will be going live to talk through this 2-game slate once again. But let's go ahead and start off with the OKC Denver game. We'll start off on the OKC side. So on OKC, it starts with SGA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He's 8,700 on DraftKings. He is, $35 on Yahoo. Obviously, he's one of the more expensive players on the slate overall. I still think he's a really good play, even though he is expensive at 8,700. Price is obviously important, basically every slate. On a 2-gamer, though, it's not as important just because, even if we only get maybe 40, 45 DraftKings points from SJ, I would say 45. Even if we get like 45 DK points from him, obviously that's not great at 8,700, but on a 2-game slate, it can definitely be good enough because raw points matter a lot more on 2-gamers. Same could be said for some of the other studs, like Jokic, for example. Even if we only get maybe 55 from Jokic, like he could still be in the winning lineup just because there's really no other guys that could maybe even come close to him. I still like SGA a ton on this slate. Even though he is really expensive, he's still a guy I want to try and build around. 8,700 on DK, $35 on Yahoo. I like him quite a bit on both sides. We know this OKC offense, it runs through SGA. This is going to be a guy that we see regularly put up big games. Obviously, here on the road against Denver is not the most ideal matchup, but really when you look at this slate as a whole, both these games are not, they kind of look like the same. If you look at the totals, you look at the spreads, we got a 219 total in the OKC Denver game, a 217 total in the New Orleans Utah game. Like, there's not really any standout matchups. Like, maybe on the Denver side, like probably Denver has the best matchup going up against OKC, but when it comes to pace, expected points scored, like both these games kind of look very similar to me. So I'm not really worried too much about matchup here, especially not on a 2-game slate. So I do really like SGA. We know the offense is running through him. We know the usage is going to be there on a nightly basis. This is going to be a guy we see put up 45, 50-point games a lot this season. And coming off a big game last time out against the Bulls, he could definitely repeat that here against Denver. So I do like SGA quite a bit. Darius Bazley, I think, is definitely in play at 5,600. Now, he's been someone that's been really inconsistent this year. He's been up and down for sure, but with Al Horford out, I think that does benefit Bazley a little bit. Maybe they run more small ball lineups, maybe play him at the 5 a little bit. I doubt they do that against Jokic, but maybe whenever Jokic is off the floor, they can play some lineups where they have Bazley at the 5, which should boost his rebounding numbers, should boost his production overall. Regardless, though, this is a guy with upside for sure. We know the minutes are going to be there. As long as the game is close, Bazley's going to play probably 32 to 34 minutes. Definitely has upside at 5,600, so I do have some interest in him on this slate. Really on these 2-game slates, it's hard not to like. It's hard. I don't want to say it's hard not to like everyone, but you really can't go wrong with anybody on a 2-game slate. Like, if you're playing some of the big tournaments on DK, for example, this $1 million tournament with $200K to first, It's got 65,000 entries in it. Obviously, on a 2-gamer, you're going to see a lot of duplicated lineups. You're going to see very high ownership. You're going to have to find a way to get different on these slates. So guys like, Kendrick Williams, Mike Muscala, like these are guys we can actually consider. Normally we would never be playing these guys, but on 2-game slates, these guys are viable just because they could randomly pop off the bench and be someone that, kind of wins you a tournament, is able to separate you from the field. So we'll talk about them in a second, but like Bazley, I have interest in. Lou Dort, a guy that I never really like playing, but he's coming off a big game. He's someone that does have upside. Obviously his floor is very low, but he can pop off at times. He can have games where he just knocks down a lot of threes. He grabs a bunch of rebounds. He can obviously get defensive stats. He's a great defender. He can get you 3, 4, 5 steals, and that's not surprising. Like he had 6 steals last game, and it's not surprising to see that happen. So I do have some interest in Dort. I would prefer Bazley if I can get up to Bazley, but I think Dort's definitely viable. Diallo, I'm probably not as interested in at 4,700. His minutes have started to trend down. Like he just hasn't looked good recently. His price tag is still kind of up as well. I guess he's the one guy that I really don't like much from OKC. George Hill, though, I think is viable for sure. His minutes have been all over the place this year, but most games he's going to start, probably play like mid to high 20s in minutes. At only 4,300, George Hill can randomly pop off for like 30, 35 DraftKings points. We've seen him do it at times this season. I don't mind him as a cheaper guy to target from OKC, but George Hill, he's probably not a top value for me. Isaiah Roby, though, is definitely a top value. He's a guy that I do like quite a bit on both sides. So he's 4,100 on DraftKings. He has power forward eligibility, which I think makes him very appealing. On Yahoo, he's center only, which sucks, but he's minimum salary, so he looks like a really good value on Yahoo as well. So we do know that Al Horford is going to remain out for this game. He's going to be out for a couple of games. I think he's out. I think his wife had a baby, so that's why he's been out recently. And he's going to be out for today, which should mean that Isaiah Roby continues to start at center. He's been starting recently. He started the game against the Bulls. He fouled out in 26 minutes, but he was still pretty productive in that time. Played 24 DraftKings points. Horford was also out in the game against the Lakers, and Roby started that game. Played 24 minutes in a blowout and scored 27 DraftKings points. On a point per minute basis this year, when he's gotten minutes, he's been really productive. He's averaged about a fantasy point per minute. If he's going to play 26, 28 minutes here for 4,100, he definitely looks like one of the better values on this 2-game slate. Now, the matchup is scary against Jokic. The foul trouble concerns are definitely there as well. Like, obviously, he could get in foul trouble going up against Jokic. But at 4,100, a point per minute guy that's going to play close to 30 minutes, I think Isaiah Roby does look like one of the better values on this slate right now. I do like him quite a bit on both sides. He definitely stands out as a cheap option. Now, these are more dart throws, but these are guys that are still in play just because it is a 2-game slate, like I said. Like Kendrick Williams for 3,600. Last game with Al Horford out, he got 27 minutes. I have no idea if that happens again. Maybe with Horford out, they can play some more small ball lineups, which will allow, Williams to get on the floor more. This is someone that I think you can definitely target in tournaments. Like if you're playing large field GPPs and you're looking for a way to get different, Williams is someone that does have some upside coming off the bench. We've seen him put up solid games last 2 games that he's played. I have no idea if he plays 15 minutes. I have no idea if he plays 27 minutes. Your guess is as good as mine, but I think with Horford being out, that at least gives him the opportunity to maybe see a few more minutes. My best guess is he probably plays like 20 to 22 minutes, and at 3,600, I mean, he could pop off for a game that does put you in a good spot to win a tournament. Like if Kendrick Williams puts up 26, 28 DraftKings points, normally that's not a score that, you're scared that you faded. I mean, anytime a guy at 3,600 puts up like 26 points, I mean, that's not like you have to have them to win. But on a 2-game slate like this, you could definitely see Kendrick Williams in the winning lineup if he only scores like 25 points, especially if a lot of the studs go off and you need those studs at the top. So I like taking a shot on him in tournaments as a lower-owned option. I don't mind him at all. I think Mike Muscala as well, especially if you're looking for a way to get off of Isaiah Roby. Like if Isaiah Roby gets in foul trouble right out of the gate, Mike Muscala is going to be the guy that comes in to replace him. Muscala is another guy that can be productive when he does get minutes. At 3,400, obviously I probably wouldn't play Roby and Muscala together, but I think if you want to fade Roby, if you're looking for someone to play a lower ownership that gives you leverage off of Roby, Muscala is probably the guy at 3,400, so I could see going him on this short slate. But other than that, I think that kind of does it for OKC. Now, moving on to the Denver side, obviously it starts off with Nikola Jokic at the top. He's really expensive on this slate, but on a short slate like this, 2 games, I don't want to fade Nikola Jokic. I want to try and find a way to get him into my lineups because, like I said earlier, even if he has a somewhat bad game and only scores like 50, 55 DK points, he could still possibly be in the winning lineup just because raw points matter so much more on short slates like this. So really like Jokic at the top. Definitely someone I'm trying to build around on this 2-gamer. He's expensive, but I think we have enough value to where we can, pretty comfortably fit him into the builds. Obviously, I don't need to really say much when it comes to Jokic. The dude's just an absolute stud. He's a great point-per-minute player. He's a guy that can just stuff the stat sheet, can contribute in all categories. It's a fantastic matchup as well. It's going to be some combination of Isaiah Roby and Mike Muscala trying to guard Jokic, and I don't expect either one of those guys to have much success at all. Jokic is a great pay-up option. He's someone I'm definitely going to be trying to jam in on this slate. But like Jamal Murray, I like quite a bit as well. He got off to a really slow start at the beginning of the year, but he's been playing much better lately. 40 and 46 DraftKings points in his last 2 games. The minutes have been pretty high as well. Jamal Murray, I think this is going to be someone that's pretty inconsistent. Like, he's not a guy that you ever know what you're going to get from on a nightly basis, but the upside is definitely there. And on a 2-gamer like this, I would not mind at all playing Jokic and Murray together. Normally, I don't play those 2 guys together because they kind of negatively correlate, but if you get a high-scoring game here, we know a lot of the offensive production in Denver is going to come from both Jokic and Murray. Those are going to be the 2 guys that are putting up the big games. And we saw last game, and even the game before that, like, Jokic still had 60 points. Murray had 40. Like, these guys can definitely both put up ceiling games. For 7,300, I like Jamal Murray quite a bit, and I think you can definitely play him with Nikola Jokic. I don't mind doing that at all on this slate. Will Barton, I do have some interest in. While Michael Porter Jr. remains out, Barton's going to start. He's going to play probably 30 to 32 minutes most nights. The minutes have kind of fluctuated, but if he's playing well, he'll get minutes. He's definitely shown some upside in the starting lineup. He's a guy that can score, can kind of do a little bit of everything when it comes to peripherals, can give you a few rebounds, a few assists, can get defensive stats as well. At 5,700, especially given the small forward position and kind of how weak it is, Will Barton does stand out quite a bit as small forward. I do have some interest in him. JaMychal Green, not the biggest fan of at 4,600. I wish he was a little bit cheaper. His minutes kind of been all over the place. Some games you'll see him get higher, like high 20s. Some games he's in the low 20s. I think most nights you're going to get like 20 to 22 minutes from JaMychal Green. He is productive when he's on the floor, but at 4,600, doesn't really feel like a guy I have to have at that price point. I think there's some other guys for cheaper that I would rather roster. Paul Millsap, another guy that probably only going to play about 20 to 22 minutes. He's shown at times he can randomly pop off and put up 30 DraftKings points in 20 minutes. Between him and JaMychal Green, I think I would rather roster Paul Millsap just because Millsap is a starter, and I think his path to more minutes is probably a little bit higher. Neither guy, though, I'm too confident in today. I think on the Denver side, Green and Millsap are probably like my 2 least favorite options when you look at the guys like above 4K. Now, Gary Harris is a guy I do actually have a good amount of interest in. He's only 4,400 on DraftKings. I like him quite a bit on DK. I like him on Yahoo as well. He has minimum salary over there, $10 at shooting guard, so I think he definitely stands out over on Yahoo at shooting guard. So Gary Harris, kind of another one of those guys that, you really never know what you're going to get from him on a nightly basis, but he's been playing a little bit better recently. The minutes have kind of been up as well. I think most nights in competitive games, if Gary Harris is playing well, he's probably going to get over 30 minutes. At 4,400, he definitely has a path to pay off this price point. Good matchup against OKC. OKC, not really that good of a defensive team. Harris, they're going to need his defense. He's a guy that can defend, so they're going to probably put him on SGA. He'll be needed to slow down SGA. I do like him at 4,400 as sort of a pay-down option that we can look to on the slate. I do prefer him over Millsap, over JaMychal Green. I think his path to, if there's anybody in this, between those 3 guys, between Green, Millsap, and Harris, if there's one guy that can play 36 minutes, I think it's definitely going to be Gary Harris. So I do like him at 4,400. He's probably my favorite, cheaper option to target from the Nuggets. Now, Monte Morris, I don't know if I can go there. His minutes have kind of been somewhat high. He's played at least 23 minutes in 4 straight games. His upside's not that high. Whenever Jamal Murray and Jokic are healthy, Morris is just not going to contribute much. Neither is Gary Harris, but I think I feel a little bit better about Gary Harris. I think Gary Harris has an easier path to 30-plus DraftKings points. I would probably rather roster him than Morris, but Morris is definitely in play on a short slate like this. I don't mind him as a cheaper, lower-owned option. PJ Dozier, he had a good game last game, 28 minutes, 27 DraftKings points. He's another one of these guys that you can definitely take a shot on. Between him and Monte Morris, I think I'd actually rather roster PJ Dozier. I think Dozier gives you a little bit more upside. We've seen when he gets minutes, he can be really productive. Even in limited minutes, he's shown upside at times. He's a guy that can do a little bit of everything. At 3,900, him and Kendrick Williams are kind of like two of my more favorite, GPP dart throws, just guys you can look to as a way to get, contrarian. I do have some interest in Dozier. I do have some interest in Kendrick Williams on the other side of this game, but I think that kind of does it for the Denver side. Really no one else, none of these minimum salary guys stand out to me. Once you get past Dozier, there's really nothing else I like from Denver. So we can go ahead and move on to the next game, New Orleans, Utah. We'll start off on the New Orleans side. So on New Orleans, we know, a lot of the usage is going to be dominated by the top two guys, Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson. Obviously, on a short two-game slate like this, Brandon Ingram is definitely in play, but he's 9,100. This doesn't feel like a slate where I'm really going to be trying to jam in Brandon Ingram. I think I'd be way more likely to play SGA for cheaper. I'd want to try and get up to Jokic if I can. I'd rather save salary and play Jamal Murray. Ingram, out of the guys above 7K, when you're looking at, let's see, Murray, Gobert, Williamson, Mitchell, Ingram, Jokic. I think Ingram's probably my least favorite of all those guys given his price. 9,100 is still a pretty expensive price tag for Brandon Ingram. Plus Zion plus Lonzo Ball could return for this game, which I think would maybe hurt Ingram a little bit. Not the biggest fan of Ingram overall in the slate. I think I'd rather play Zion for cheaper. Zion, we know, still has a ton of upside. 7,900 obviously is not the most appealing price. Obviously, this matchup is not the most appealing either against Utah. But like I said earlier, I wouldn't get too fed up in matchups here, given both these teams or both these games. In terms of matchups, there's nothing really that stands out. I think Zion's definitely in play here at 7,900. We know he's going to get 34 to 35 minutes if it's a close game. We know he has a path to 45, 50 plus Draftkings points. I do prefer him between him and Ingram. If I had to roster one of those two guys from the Pelicans, it would definitely be Zion for me. Now, Lonzo Ball, he is questionable for this game, but it seems like he's going to have a pretty good chance to return. Last I saw that it said he was planning on returning, plus he was a full participant in their 45-minute practice on Monday. So that does make me assume that Lonzo will be back for this game. Obviously, Lonzo this season has not really been someone we've really considered much for DFS. He hasn't really put up any huge games this year. He's had a couple games with over 40 DK points. He still has a path to a ceiling. I think in tournaments, Lonzo's someone you can definitely look to just because out of all these Pelicans guys, I think he's probably going to be the lowest owned, especially if we don't get any updates on him. If we don't get news till 8 o'clock at night that Lonzo's playing, then he's going to be really, really low owned. And basically, this season, Lonzo's kind of been the least appealing guy to target from the Pelicans. On the two-game slate like this, though, I'm just trying to look for a way to get different. So in tournaments, rostering Lonzo, it probably what's going to be maybe 15% ownership at the highest. He's going to be low owned for a two-game slate. I actually do like him in tournaments just as a way to get different. Assuming he does play, I think he looks pretty appealing at 6,300. I would definitely rather roster him than Eric Bledsoe. I've been playing Bledsoe recently with Lonzo out, but now that Lonzo seems likely to return, probably not going to be on Bledsoe at 6K. I think I would rather go to Lonzo at 6,300. Steven Adams, I'm not the biggest fan of at 6,100. I think there's other guys I'd rather target on the slate. Steven Adams' upside just isn't really that high. Not the best matchup either against Gobert. I know, matchups shouldn't worry too much about that on this slate, but I think there's other centers that I would rather go to. Not the biggest fan of Steven Adams. If Lonzo returns, I have no interest in Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I don't have much interest in Josh Hart either. He's still going to play pretty good minutes off the bench, but he just really doesn't have a ton of upside at all. Lonzo returning would hurt Hart a little bit as well. Now, JJ Redick, I think, is actually someone we can consider in tournaments just because at 4K, he's a guy that can get hot off the bench, can randomly pop off for 25, 30 DraftKings points if his shot's fallen. Normally, I never consider JJ Redick when the Pelicans are fully healthy. But like I said, on a two-game slate like this where we're trying to get different, someone like JJ Redick coming off the bench can be a guy that kind of wins you a tournament. If he pops off, knocks down 6 or 7 threes, puts up, 25, 30 DK points, that could be, kind of like the winning tournament play, the guy you could see in the winning tournament lineup at really low ownership. So he's one of those guys, him, PJ Dozier, Kendrick Williams. Those are the three guys I kind of like as, lower owned tournament plays. But really, other than that, I think that kind of does it for the Pelicans. This team pretty much as a whole, it's going to be like Zion, Lonzo in tournaments. And then, if you want to take a shot on JJ Redick, I like him as well. But mainly like Zion, the guy I like the most from the Pelicans. Really nothing else stands out though. But we'll go ahead and move on to the Utah side. We'll finish off with Utah before we end the video. So at the top, Donovan Mitchell, you got 8,200. I'm not the biggest fan of Mitchell on the slate. I think he's a little bit too expensive for me. Again, probably would rather roster SGA for $500 more. Would rather save salary and play Jamal Murray. Honestly, I'd rather save $600 and play Gobert. I do prefer Gobert over Mitchell today. He's someone I do have some interest in at 7,600. Gobert, Not normally a guy that has a massive ceiling. Like, rarely do you see Gobert pop off for like 50-plus Draftkings points, but he can definitely give you 40 to 45, and that could be good enough on this slate, given that, raw points are way more important than, ceiling games. Obviously, some guys are going to pop off for ceiling games, but even if you get, kind of what, like floor games from maybe Jokic or Gobert, even if Jokic puts up 50 or 55, even if Gobert puts up like 40, you could see, still one of those two guys be in the winning lineup just because it's a two-game slate and, there's just not a ton of options. Like at the center position as a whole, let's take a look at center real quick. So at center, you basically got Jokic at the top, Zion, Gobert, Steven Adams, Paul Millsap, Isaiah Roby, and that kind of does it. Like once you get past, Mike Muscala maybe, but like the position's so thin that even if Jokic or Gobert have like mediocre games, they could still be in the winning lineup just because there's really no other centers to roster. So I still do like Gobert quite a bit. I actually prefer him over Mitchell, like we said. Obviously, I want to try and get up to Jokic if I can at center, but Gobert is definitely in play. Mike Conley, I have some interest in at 6,800. I think between him and Mitchell, I'd rather save salary and roster Mike Conley. Conley's been good this year. He's been productive. Definitely, his floor is still somewhat low, but we've seen the last, 5 games. He's been over 32 DraftKings points in 5 straight games. Been very consistent, has 40-plus in 2 of those 5. Against the Pelicans, I would say this is probably the best matchup out of all of them for all these guys. Like either Denver facing OKC or Utah facing New Orleans. That's probably like the best, matchups that you can find. So Mike Conley, I do have interest in at 6,800. Not a core play, not a guy that really stands out as someone I want to have my night rely on, but definitely someone I will be mixing into my player pool. Jordan Clarkson, I think his price is getting to a point where I don't want to have my night really ride on Jordan Clarkson. Would much rather get up to Mike Conley if I can. With Joe Ingles out the last few games, we've seen Clarkson get pretty good minutes off the bench. He's been playing like 28 to 30 minutes off the bench. I would probably rather get up to, Mike Conley, though, if I can. I think Conley gives you more upside. I think he's a lot safer. Clarkson's probably going to be a fade for me. If I was going to roster him today, I think it would be on Yahoo where he's way cheaper. He's only $20 over there, so I think he looks a lot more appealing on Yahoo. On DraftKings, I don't really see myself playing much Jordan Clarkson at 6,500. Now, Bojan Bogdanovic, I actually do like a good amount on both sites. He's only $5,300 on DK. He's pretty cheap on Yahoo as well, coming in at $14 at the small forward position. So Bojan, he's like another one of these guys that I haven't really rostered much at all this year. We haven't really seen a ton of good games from him, but this is one of those guys that can definitely put up a score that like kind of wins you a tournament. Like we know Bojan is a scorer. He's a guy that shoots a ton of threes. He can just randomly pop off, kind of like JJ Redick, and just knock down like 6 or 7 threes. We've seen him go off for 31 DK points, 38 DK points. If he has one of those games where he knocks down 6 or 7 threes, that could definitely be a winning tournament play. And I don't think Bojan's going to be that popular on this slate, given there's some other small forward plays that stand out. I do like him quite a bit here against the Pelicans. I believe the Pelicans have allowed a ton of three-point attempts this year, or like the most open three-pointer attempts allowed. So pretty good matchup for Bojan for his skill set. I like him a good amount on both sides, especially given how how weak the small forward position is. Bojan does stand out to me at 5,300. Royce O'Neal just can't get there at 5,200. I'd much rather roster Bojan. I think Bojan gives you more upside. Royce O'Neal, even in like 36 minutes, could put up 20 fantasy points. Like he just doesn't have a ton of upside. Not a guy I want to have a ton of exposure to, even on a 2-game slate. I'll let other people go to Royce O'Neal today. Joe Ingles, if he plays, even at 5K, doesn't look that appealing. Really, once you get past like Bojan, there's not a ton else that I love from Utah. I think Utah's a pretty straightforward team. I think the top 5 guys, Mitchell, Gobert, Conley, Clarkson, Bojan, that's kind of where you want to have your exposure to on the Utah side, and really nothing else after that. So that basically does it for Utah, and that basically does it for this 2-game slate, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Obviously a pretty quick one, but just 2 games to break down. Pretty short Tuesday night slate, but we should be back on Wednesday with a big slate. I think there's a ton of games Wednesday, like 11 or 12 games on Wednesday, so we'll have a full slate to break down then. But until then, guys, I appreciate you watching the video. If you did enjoy, hit that like button before you do get out of here. Hit the subscribe button as well. Click the notification bell so that way you do get notified every time I upload. You also get notified every time I do go live. And like I said at the beginning of the video, guys, I do plan on going live for today's slate. I'll probably be live later on in the afternoon around 4:30, 5 o'clock Eastern time. So if you're able to tune into the live stream, I would appreciate it if you would do so. If you have any questions about tonight's slate, I can answer them in the live stream. So tune in if you can. But best of luck tonight, guys. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.